Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Reflecting the Way Radio. I'm glad you found us. This is actually part 2 on our series on money and the root of evil. If you haven't listened to episode 1, I would encourage you to definitely go back and do that. If you're listening live, by all means, don't turn me off. Keep on listening. I'm sure you'll get something out of it, but certainly go back and listen to episode 1 in this series. That's episode number 3 for Reflecting the Way Radio, but part 1 of this series for money and the root of evil, as that will lay a foundation for what we're going to touch on here tonight. If you've read the description, you'll see that the topics are a little far-ranging and pretty broad this evening, or whenever you're listening to this, it's evening for me, but might not be for you. We're going to talk about everything from modern slavery to psychic vampirism, alchemy, and your cursed work week. So we're going to dive right in here and not waste too much time. Just a tiny little refresher. I'm not going to park here very long. If you'll recall from last time, we talked about how money is created. And just to remind you and refresh your memory, money itself, as some of you will be aware even before you listen to our previous content, is actually not a measure of wealth, but it is in fact inherently a negative value because it's always issued at interest. Every dollar that you possess and every dollar that is in the economy was issued by your central bank at interest, so it has an intrinsically negative value. And that's important to understand as we move forward here. Before we go any further, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't read the article behind this episode, I would encourage you to scroll to the description box below or check us out on the website at www.reflectingtheway.com, spelled exactly like it sounds. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter, Reflecting the Way on Facebook and at Reflect the Way on Twitter. There has been some, let's say, spirited discussion on our Facebook page over the last couple of weeks here with the holidays. Go over and check that out. Feel free to jump in or not. It's up to you. Conversation has been pretty interesting over there at any rate. While you're on the website, don't forget to subscribe to our email list. That's on the footer of every page and the right sidebar of most pages. We won't spam you. We will just give you the odd update and let you know when new content is coming out, give you the inside track on live shows and stuff like that. So if you could do that, that would definitely help us out. And without any further ado, let's get going here. I just mentioned about that review there that money is inherently negative. So keep that in the back of your mind as we go. And if you haven't listened to the other episode or read the other article, that will definitely help you along the way here. So to get started, if you pull a bill out of your billfold or your wallet or your pocket or whatever, I'm going to guess that within a couple seconds you'll notice or your eyes will come to at least one occult symbol, if not many more. Now, just for the record, my frame of reference here is with North American currencies, though this does hold true for most of the world that I'm aware of. Canadian currency, that's my primary. I've got a great deal of experience with the American stuff. Both of those are absolutely loaded from head to toe with occult symbols. And I'm not going to go into what those symbols are in depth here. That has been done many, many times by many, many people, and it's been done very well. So if you want to know more about that, do a little bit of digging yourself. It won't take you long. You'll get lots of content on it, and lots of it's very good. Just to mention a couple of the obvious ones, you know, on your American $1 bill, most people are familiar with the all-seeing eye on the back and the eagle beside the all-seeing eye on the other end of the bill. Canadian money is replete with references to DNA and the return of the Nephilim or apotheosis. Actually, it's both together, but like I said, I won't delve into it too deep here. Just suffice it to say that your money is covered in occult symbols. Now, there's two reasons that this is done. The first, and probably the best understood, it's been covered quite extensively, like I mentioned, is what is called in the occult lesser magic. Now, just before I go into that, let me say from the outset here that what I am going to present here, I do not necessarily believe as I'm presenting it. What I'm doing is I am relaying information from the dark brotherhoods and the black fraternities to you so that you can be equipped to understand the world around you and better combat the evil dark forces that surround us every day. Now, when I say what I say, don't assume that I agree with it or that I believe it, and I'm not expecting you to either. Make your own come to your own conclusion on that. But that out of the way, one of the first reasons that those symbols are put there is lesser magic. Now, as many of you listening, I'm sure, are aware, the people behind your money system are those same people that are responsible for or are involved in the fraternities, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the Knights of Columbus, the Knights Templar, and so on. So what they're doing is they're branding your money with their symbols. Now, on the surface, that doesn't make a lot of sense if they're trying to stay hidden, right? They're telegraphing who they are and where this money comes from, so why would they do that? And this isn't where I'm going to park, but they are doing it because they believe it gives them power to put themselves out there in front of you in such a way that you can't see it or understand it. This is why you have what they call predictive programming on TV and in movies as well. In the wake of 9/11, 2001, everybody's familiar with the disaster. What lots of people aren't aware of is that for 10 to 15 years before that incident was portrayed in whole or in part many, many times in the media, just as it happened. You can go look that up for yourself. But what they're doing there is kind of the same thing they're doing on your money, is they are putting in front of you who they are, what they're doing, what their intent is, and what they're going to do with and to you. Now, why would they do that? Well, in these occult orders, it's believed that by showing the poor, stupid animals that are the common man what the elites are doing to them, number one, it absolves them of any negative karma that may come their way in their belief for enslaving you or bombing you or taking advantage of you or, charging you exorbitant amounts of interest like they do. They believe that because they have put this out there in front of you, even though it's encoded, they are absolved from the consequences of their actions once they've showed you what they're doing. So going back to the 9/11 example, because that's one we can all relate to, they showed you planes crashing into the World Trade Center, and they made comments out the side of their mouth that it was going to happen. But those who died, well, they should have known better because we told them, right? So they are absolved for those murders in their twisted idea of the way the universe works. They will not have those murders visited back upon them through karma or in the next life or whatever. And it's the same deal with the money. They're showing you what they're doing. They're telling you who they are, assuming that you're not going to be able to see what they're telling you because you're just that stupid. And unfortunately, most of the population is that ignorant that they don't know what they're looking at. I don't say ignorant to be nasty or anything. I mean it in the truest sense of the word. They are ignorant. They just plain don't know. But that's not really what I want to touch on in this show. Like I said, that's been well documented, and there's been a lot of content put out on that. So I don't think I can add anything that will be of value to you beyond what's already out there. That's the lesser magic. The question then to me becomes, what is the greater magic, if you will? Why is it that these things are on here so blatantly and so pervasively on absolutely every bill you pick up? Well, this is what I understand, and this is what has been shown to me as to the nature of the symbols on your money. They are literally magical talismans. Now, what they do, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But it's important to understand that not only is money a measure of monetary value, although it's intrinsically negative when it comes to wealth, that's the way we measure value in our society. This is $1, this is $5, so on. That's how we ascribe value to something. There's another way to look at money, and that is as a measure of expended energy. Now, that might sound odd at first, but when you think about it, how do you earn your money? How do you get money in your hand? Well, I'd say 99% of normal people, to get money, have to go to work a job, put in time, and then they get paid for it. They're either paid hourly or by salary, where they exchange their time for money, or they're paid a commission, where they exchange their sales for money, for dollars or euros or whatever, for currency. Or maybe you go to work and you are paid per unit of production. So you are literally paid directly for your output. But in all three of these examples, there's a common denominator, and that is you have to put in your time and energy to get out dollars, right? So now that you have these dollars, what do you do with them? Well, you spend them one way or another. Either you spend them on goods or services, or you use it to pay off debt. So remember, money itself is debt, but we're not going to go back there for now. Every time a bill or a unit of currency on an automated bank system changes hands, there's an exchange of energy going on. You go to work, you earn $1. You drive home from work, you stop at a store, and you buy something with that dollar. Now, that store has to put out energy to attract you into their store. They have to keep the lights on, they have to stock the shelves, they have to sweep the floor, they have to employ people. So they've put out energy to earn your dollar. The cashier that rings you through at the checkout, she is trading her time to earn a fraction of that dollar that you've paid the establishment, so the cycle just continues. And any dollar you have in your hand or in your bank account may have been earned and spent several hundred times before it returns to where it came from originally, and that's the central bank, or when it goes back to source, if you like. Now, I said that the symbols on your dollar bills and your euros and whatever, they're actually magical talismans. And what they're doing, what those bills are actually doing, is every time they change hands and energy is expended, they're harvesting that energy and storing it. That money is being circulated, and it's constantly collecting energy from people that have been working for it, spending it, working for it, spending it, okay? Every time it changes hands, there's a transfer of energy, and that money is harvesting that energy and holding on to it until one day all money is destined by fate, more or less, to find its way back to source, back to the top of that money pyramid where it originally came from. Now, given the audience that I have and the folks that are listening to this and the folks that read my material, I don't think it's any great shock to say to anybody that I say that the controllers at the top of that money pyramid are, frankly, occult. They're evil. They are working for the dark side, right? So this is not done by accident. This is done very much on purpose, and this is a very ancient science. But what these people do is they sit at the top of this money pyramid, and besides earning wealth and real tangible wealth off of your back, they are also literally harvesting your soul or spirit energy. The energy is not heat or light or kinetic potential or anything that we would traditionally associate with energy. It is an ethereal energy. It is a spirit energy. It is, well, I mean, Easterners have names for it, but I'm not going to go there for fear of being accused of being something I'm not. But there is an energy associated in the spiritual with earning and spending money, and these talismans are keeping it, holding it, and it is being siphoned off by the controllers at the top of that money pyramid. So basically what you have is this, at the top of this money pyramid is just this big, ugly, black, leathery winged vampire that is sucking the life out of you, literally sucking the life out of you. It's not a vampire that sucks blood. It's a vampire that just sucks your energy, psychically, for lack of a better term. Now, this plays right into something else quite nicely, and that is the fact that, well, let me start over. That's one aspect to it, this psychic siphoning of energy. But many folks will be aware of the fact that alchemy was a driving factor in much of the ancient world for several thousand years, even until current day. And alchemy is a very broad, very deep, very convoluted topic. But most folks understand that in alchemy, there was this quest for the philosopher's stone, this way to create something from nothing, to literally, transmute lead into gold. That's the classic kind of children's story version of alchemy. And there's a lot more to it than that, but that understanding will suffice for now. That's kind of what I like to call the front porch understanding of alchemy, this turning lead into gold. And this was a dream of the alchemists for thousands of years. Now, what most people don't understand is that the modern fractional reserve interest-driven banking system is literally the ultimate incarnation or the capstone of thousands of years of alchemy. The controllers behind the banks have literally found a way to take a comparatively worthless substance, a commodity, paper, or cotton, or in some cases plastic polymer, doesn't matter, whatever your money's printed on. They take this comparatively worthless commodity, they stamp their arcane devilish symbols on it, they tell you it has value, they borrow it to you at interest, enslave you by debt, it's called indentured servitude, and then what happens? This money goes out through you and through everybody you know and through governments, and it harvests this energy, but it also, at several points along the way, it accrues interest, and it accrues interest, and it accrues interest. So you borrowed $1, you promised to pay $1.10 back, and then that gets paid back, and so on and so forth. This $1 just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing through interest. Now, if you listen or check out our previous article or episode on this, you'll know that interest ultimately can never be repaid, but parts of it can be eventually. So not only have they convinced you that worthless paper is valuable, now they're also amplifying the perceived value of that paper as it comes back to them. And then what they do is they take this worthless paper, which they know is worthless, and when it comes back to source, they siphon off their energy, and then they go and they trade that worthless paper on hard, tangible assets. They trade in the worthless paper that you gave them back tenfold of what they gave you because of all the interest. And they turn around and they take these debt-bearing notes that have an intrinsically negative value, give them to somebody else in exchange for real assets. And that person walks away thinking, yeah, hit the mother load. You wouldn't believe what that guy paid me for my 10 acres of land. But guess what? You've walked away with interest-bearing notes, and they've walked away with hard, tangible, actual measure of wealth assets. They trade the paper for precious metals, for land holdings, for water rights, for mineral rights, for real estate, for actual hard, tangible assets that are actually a real measure of wealth, especially the precious metals. Now, I say especially the precious metals because God got rather honked off at Israel when they were not dealing in just weights and measures, and precious metals are always just weights and measures. I mean, unless somebody's trying to cheat you on their weight, but that's a different topic and kind of off track here. But they're literally taking worthless paper and turning it to gold. Now, that might not sound as mystical and spiritual as some guru in a cave with a turban on, smoking some hashish and chanting over a lead ingot and having it morph magically into gold. It doesn't sound as mystical, but it is every bit as spiritual, and it is every bit as dangerous. One might appear to be more overtly demonic than the other, but it really isn't. The money system is corrupt from head to tail. And frankly, it's rotten from the head. An old Russian proverb says that fish rot from the head. Well, that fish was rotten when they pulled it out of the drink, unfortunately. Now, you're thinking, well, that sounds pretty bad. Yeah, it does sound pretty bad. But it gets worse, because there is actually a numerological curse encoded in your weekday. Now, this ties into that whole modern slavery thing. If you are living and breathing and listening to this, obviously then you have internet, so you've paid for it, or you're in a country that at least has free internet somewhere, but you still got a device. Fact of the matter is, you're plugged into this system because you paid someone something for something with money, so you had to earn that money somehow. So you're a part of this system whether you like it or not, unfortunately for you, me, and everyone else. But there's literally a curse encoded in your work week. Now, I know this isn't true across the board, and some of what I'm going to say may only work in English, though that may not matter because I believe English is the language of confusion, and I could talk about that some other time maybe. But the curse that's encoded in your work week goes something like this. Take this for what it's worth. If you don't agree, that's fine, but hear me out. You work 5 days a week, 8 hours a day for a total of 40 hours, right? Okay, so 8 hours a day. 8 in the occult. Now, I understand this is the occult, but remember, these are the people that set this up. 8 is the number of money and power. Not for your benefit, for theirs, okay? So you work 8 hours a day, money and power. You work 5 days a week. 5 has a dual meaning. In different circles, it means different things. In one case, it is a binding agent. 5 is the number of points on a pentagram, for instance. 5 is how you bind the dark spirits to do your bidding, right? If you're a black magician or a magician at all, for that matter. So you work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. You've worked the money and power number with the number for binding demons. It's also the number of the common man in certain understandings of the occult. And obviously that'd be most of us, I'm assuming, certainly me, the common man. I'm by no means at the top of any kind of pyramid. So you've got this interesting thing where you're working 5 days a week, which is, number one, your number, according to those at the top, because you're common. And number two, it's also a binding agent with regard to demons. So that's interesting in and of itself. But then what happens is you work 40 hours a week. Now, there have been occultists, and, well, frankly, there's a bit of a biblical bent on this too, where 40 is the number of trials and testing in the Bible, right? It's also the number of judgment, if I understand correctly. You know, you had 40 days and 40 nights of rain during Noah's flood and so on. Jesus was 40 days in the desert. But in occult circles, it goes a little deeper than that with the number 40. It is the number of eternal hell and punishment. And in tarot, it is the number associated with death. Okay? So you are now working for money and power, 8 hours a day, binding demons to yourself in that pursuit, working 5 days a week, and for a total of 40, which is the number of death or punishment. Now, the implications there should be immediately obvious, but it gets worse because this death and punishment deal here, and the 8 and 5, 8 is also associated with Nimrod or Osiris, if you like. You know, the ancient divine fallen family, whatever you want to call them, Isis, Osiris, and Horus. The 8-pointed star is always associated with the male principle in that case. Now, 5 here isn't, this goes back to the demon thing again. There's not really much difference with the 5, but the 40 being associated with death. You are literally, as you go to work for 40 hours a week, sacrificing your youth, okay? And the reason you're sacrificing your youth is 8 plus 5 is 13, the start of your teens or your youth, right? It also has a spiritual connotation. I'm not sure if we'll go there. We'll see. 8 plus 5 is 13, you know, for money and power and binding demons. You're sacrificing your youth You know, you're bringing on your early death, number 40, in exchange for money and power, right? And I think I'll cover that 13 thing some other time because it's kind of off topic, but regardless, you are changing, you are accepting money in exchange for your youth and an early grave, essentially. That is the curse that's encoded in your work week. Not only that, but in English, it gets worse than that because you work 5 days a week and then you get a weekend, right? Well, do you think it's any coincidence that it just so happens you work 5 weekdays and then you get week, right? You work 5 weekdays, W-E-E-K, and then you are week, W-E-A-K, right? And then you have a weekend, W-E-E-K-E-N-D. You have a weekend because you've been weakened, W-E-A-K-E-N-D, and you need time to recover so that you can go back and serve your masters better, more effectively, right? They don't give you that out of the goodness of your heart. They give you that to increase your production. Now, this goes down a whole other rabbit hole, which I'll save most of for later, but you are viewed by, now I'm not saying that your immediate boss at your job at the company that has 50 employees, your boss is not in on this, most likely. But the controllers at the top look at you as assets. They don't look at you as people, okay? You are an asset to them. They own you in their mind. Indentured servitude. There was a paper written in the early part of the 1900s talking about, and I believe it might have been written by either Warburg or Ford before the signing of the Federal Reserve Act in the United States. At any rate, the essay was specifically about moving society from what they called chattel slavery to indentured servitude and how people could be made to love their imprisonment. I would highly recommend that you read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Not child-friendly by any stretch, but it lays out exactly where society is and is heading, right? We are being made to love our servitude. When they say moving from chattel slavery to indentured servitude, what they're talking about is moving from the literal buying and selling of people, mostly blacks in this case, with regard to that essay from Africa and the United States, moving from chattel slavery where they literally physically own people to indentured servitude where they don't necessarily own you outright, though by proxy they do still own you because you owe them money, right? So the end is the same. The difference is you think you're free, you just can't see the bars in front of you. And this leads to much more compliant slaves and servants. And there's lots to talk about here, and I'm not going to go too deep on it, but why do you think, and again, this may only work in English, but again, that probably doesn't matter. Why do you think when you talk about friends, you talk about the company you keep? Why is it that you think when you go and get married, your marriage certificate, or when you fill out your taxes, it says partner? Well, that's corporate speak, is it not? And this is a deep, dark, twisty rabbit hole, and that's all I'm going to say about that for now. But what I'm trying to get across here is that this entire system, people think, oh, economic collapse is coming. We need economic reform. No, you don't. You can't reform what is basically unreformable. You can't redeem the unredeemable. This would be like trying to say that, Satan needs to follow Jesus. Maybe he could, but it wouldn't make any difference because redemption was not for him. This system is rotten from the head, right? It is completely unredeemable. It is a system that has been set in place for nefarious ends, and it can't be fixed. So why worry about it, right? Well, as followers of the way, as children of Christ, we are instructed to be in the world but not of it, and this is certainly a key factor. Now, I could tell you how I think you need to get out of this system, but I'm not going to. And the reason I'm not going to is I can tell you, but it won't mean anything to you. This is one of those things. You have to go to the throne room yourself, and you have to be tutored at the foot of the king and have him tell you what to do and how to do it. This is one of those things where you have to sweat for your answers, because if I tell it to you, it's going to be cheap and it's not going to mean a thing to you. Now, obviously, this is not really spilling any kind of beans. You should be avoiding debt like the plague. If you have a mortgage, get rid of it, right? Ultimately, you should probably be looking to be self-employed. You don't want to rely on other people for you to eat if you can avoid it. But like I said, to get out of this system, you really need to have a spirit-guided direction. I could tell you what I think you should do, but it won't mean anything. You have to sweat this out yourself. Now, having said that, you've now been presented with this information. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it. But you have been presented with it. So you now need to go prove this for yourself, one way or the other, whether you come to the conclusion that I am right or that I am wrong. You will now be held accountable for this information. So you need to make sure that you have done your due diligence and you know how to disengage from this corrupt system, how you ought to be treating your money, how your money ought to be treating you. And I hope and pray that this gives you a new perspective on the proper relationship between Christians and money, okay? Money is the root of all evil, or some translations say money is the root of all kinds of evil. Now, that's a little hard to understand until you know what money is, how it works, and what it does. Now that we've been through this, where it comes from, what it's for, and what it's doing to you, I do hope and pray that you now have a much better understanding of what that verse is trying to get across. And like I said, I'm not going to lay this out for you. Now it's time for you to pick up the torch and go do your own homework and figure this out for yourself. That's where I'm going to leave it here for this episode. I do hope that this has in some way helped you. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to drop us an email. There is a contact form on the website, or you can find us on Facebook or Twitter. Leave us a comment there. I will be sure to get back to you as soon as I can. And if you have anything that you'd like to ask regarding your specific situation, I can't promise that I can or will be able to help you specifically, but feel free to ask. I'll do my best for you anyway. And with that, folks, blessings.